Welcome to the Penn State Wrestling Show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, Greg Pickel, our reporter for wrestling, here to bring you the latest and most important information with the program as they get ready for Wyoming in a bit of a pivot, which is exciting. We'll talk about that in just 1 second. Of course, we're coming off of a 36-3 team win over Lehigh over at the PPL Center on the road. Greg had a breakdown of that at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So, Greg, welcome to the show. What are we talking about this week? What's on the rundown for today?
Yeah, we're going to add to the rundown. We should probably recap Lehigh. We didn't have that on there originally. We should probably do that. So we'll start with that. And then look ahead to Penn State hosting Wyoming in another non-conference dual meet, one of its last before the first semester of the season ends. Penn State, of course, as you know, T. Frank, that's where we're going to start today's show victorious over Lehigh at the PPL Center in Allentown. Great crowd on hand for that one. I know it probably got lost in the shuffle for many, because the football team was busy earning the number 6 seed and learning it was going to face SMU in the college football playoff just moments before this duel started. So if you did miss it, you're excused, but we will give you a full accounting here of how things played out. Then we'll get into Wyoming and some of the things we want to look for there, T. Frank.
All right, so let's get into it. I think everyone wants to start with Luke Lilledahl because the new shiny object, and also somebody who is as talented and comes out and wins this dual meet. What do you think of the situation there?
Yeah, so Luke Lilledahl, by rankings, T. Frank, it was considered an upset. He came into the weekend, number 16, facing Sheldon Seymour, very accomplished, longtime member of the Lehigh wrestling program, number 15. Late takedown led to a 4-1 win for the first-year Nittany Lion. Impressive resolve late in that match because I thought Seymour was going to finish a shot earlier in the third period. Didn't happen. And then Lilledahl ends up getting in on a great shot and gets behind the Lehigh wrestler and takes a 4-1 decision very late in the third period. So he continues to impress. We'll see if he has a chance to add another ranked win to his resume this weekend. Stay tuned for more information on that a little bit later in the show. But for now, I don't know what more Penn State fans and the Penn State coaching staff could ask from Luke Lilledahl. Now, look, one of the most accomplished pre-college guys on the roster, so no huge surprise that he's having success quickly in his career at Penn State. But he just looks the part, and he is what I think is the answer to Penn State's long-running issue at 125 in terms of not ending up on the All-American podium in that weight class. So what I think is important to note here is that as he gets better and as he gets more college experience, he's probably only going to start producing more impressive wins. This was an impressive win, not by a huge scoring margin, but I think down the road you'll see him put up some points. He's an aggressive guy, very good technician and tactician. So just very good at what he does. He does it well, and he finds ways to win. And if you're a member of Cale Sanderson's lineup, that's what you're asked to do. Yeah. And Luke Lilledahl's done a lot of it. And he has obviously continued to do so in the early part of his Penn State career. And again, we'll talk more about what could happen with him this weekend here in a little bit.
So not as many points. Cody Sanderson was asked about that at the beginning through the first 5 or so matchups. But Braeden Davis falls. Bo Bartlett gets a win. What did you see from the early wrestlers, in the lighter weights as they went through the afternoon?
Yeah, so that was discussed pretty much at length over on the Blue White Illustrated Wrestling Room message board as well. This was a match that was very different in terms of the first half and the second half. Again, that's not really a surprise, though. I feel like a majority of the Cale Sanderson era, you usually have one side of the lineup where things are quote-unquote entertaining or more competitive, I guess you could say, and then the other half of the lineup just steamrolls everyone. And it's almost always been the second half is the half that steamrolls everyone. So no great surprise there in terms of how things played out. I thought Braeden Davis acquitted himself well in losing just by decision 4-2 to number 1 Ryan Crookham of Lehigh. Davis is going to have to score more if he wants to end up being on the top podium at nationals at 133 pounds. There's no doubt about that, but I thought it was a very good learning experience for him at his new weight to face the number 1 guy this early in the season, figure out some things that he needs to do differently or better. So I just thought that that was a good learning match for him. Obviously, I'm sure he and everybody else wanted to go in and get an upset in that match, but it's a good indication of what he needs to work on here moving forward as he gets into the second semester of the year. And, obviously, just to lose by decision into the number one guy in the country in essentially his own backyard, I thought that was impressive. Didn't get blown out by any stretch of the imagination. Bo Bartlett, per the usual, kind of a workman-like 5-0 win. Lehigh's guys make you work. There's no doubt about that. And Bartlett just does not score a lot of points. That's just kind of how it is. So no real issues with that. 5-0 win over Carter Bailey. We saw Shane Van Ness pick up Penn State's first bonus points. Major decision over Matt Repos, who, if you're like me from District 3 in the PIAA map lexicon, the Harrisburg area, you remember him as a guy who had success around here before going to Lehigh. And then Tyler Kasak, close decision over Logan Rosniewski. If I can pronounce that, and I'm sure I probably screwed it up anyway. But, impressive win. This is a guy who, if you just look on paper, you might not be impressed by that win, but he was a very good prep wrestler. Obviously, I'm sure Kasak would have liked to score more points, but I had no issue with the final score there. Certainly, again, moving forward, you're going to want to see more points. But win's a win. Those guys battle, too. They're successful wrestlers, too. So, all told, yes, the second half then was a complete blowout. And not a whole lot to note there except for the big, shiny headliner note of the dual meet, which was that Josh Barr did not just beat number 6, former Nittany Lion, Michael Beard. He beat him convincingly. So Josh Barr, if you're just getting caught up on the wrestling season, is now Penn State's obvious starter at 197. There was question coming into the year whether it was going to be him or Lucas Cochran. All he's done is win so far this season. He beats Michael Beard by major decision 11-3 and announced to the college wrestling world in the process that he is All-American worthy and that he is coming for a spot on the top on the top 8 podium stand at nationals. In the new rankings after beating Beard, Barr moves up all the way to number 7 from number 23, one spot ahead of Michael Beard, who was at number 6 previously, now drops to number 8. So Barr goes from 23 to 7 after a dominating win, and the sky's the limit for that kid. It's his job. It looks to me like Kasak is probably the guy at 57, the way this has gone with Alex Facundo. Still, I guess, possibly getting his way there, but Kasak's number 4 in the country right now. I don't think he's being unseated, barring injury or sudden lack of performance. So I think the Penn State wrestling lineup is set in stone right now, T. Frank. I believe Cale Sanderson and his staff would probably still tell you differently, but
they did.
From the yeah, I'm sure they did. Yeah, but from the outside looking in, I mean, I just think that I would be surprised if your 10 starters from the Lehigh match and who we assume will be on the mat against Wyoming, if those are not your 10 guys going to the Big Ten tournament, again, barring injury or unexpected lack of success moving forward.
Yeah, so that brings us to the next duel coming up, and it's a surprise BJC duel, 1 p.m. on Sunday. Tell us a little bit about why Wyoming is at the BJC, not the marquee matchup that we've seen previously go to, the big house, and also not one that we knew of before on the schedule.
Yeah, so I guess somewhere in the Penn State athletics planning world, there was probably a thought that this could happen. The Penn State women's volleyball team is hosting an NCAA tournament event at Rec Hall this weekend. Obviously, that gets priority over Penn State wrestling because it's a postseason event. So the volleyball women's volleyball match will be at Rec Hall. And Penn State is moving, of course, the wrestling match, which has to happen on the same day as well, to the Bryce Jordan Center. So it's still at 1 o'clock. It is still not going to be televised anywhere, but streamed by big BTN Plus. The key here is that if you found yourself thinking, oh, man, I really would like to go to this match, but there's not any tickets left, there are now. There's a
lot of tickets.
Yes. So, and there's even some lower bowl seating. Now, we're recording this a little bit before noon on December 11th, but at last look before we came on to do this, depending on when you're watching it, may not still be the case, but there were some lower bowl seats still available. Obviously, anyone with season tickets got transferred over. So, if you're looking for a chance to see Penn State wrestling and maybe you feel like for whatever reason Rec Hall isn't a place for you, again, for whatever reason, here you go. You have a third opportunity to go to the Bryce Jordan Center, see Penn State in action the first time this year. There'll be 2, Iowa and Michigan. Those duels are at the Bryce Jordan Center in the second semester portion of the schedule, the 2025 portion of the schedule at the BJC. So Kind of a strange break for Penn State. They announced this. I was in an Uber going to the Big Ten title game in Indianapolis, and like, why are they sending emails out about wrestling? And then I'm like, I was like, oh, because they got to start promoting the tickets for this. So this was something that just changed recently, and Penn State wrestling, will be at the BJC against Wyoming. An interesting addition. The first time these two teams have met, T. Frank, ever. So kind of a fun little new thing for Penn State wrestling and its fans.
Yeah, and I don't know. Do Penn State wrestling fans, do they pregame, or do they? Is there a tailgating culture with wrestling?
I think because of the weather, it's more of enjoying downtown because it's such an easy walk to Rec Hall.
Perfect. I was just going to suggest.
Yeah.
Anti-Fragile Brewing Company is open 1 to 8 p.m. on Sunday. I know there's no football game, but that's our spot. That's the BWI spot. So if you're watching the wrestling show and you don't watch our other YouTube content, you don't watch the football show, we highly recommend Anti-Fragile. It's a great place to go. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, any of those times you want to check it out. Now that I got the random plug in there, Wyoming is the opponent, right? So this is also a bit of a new opponent. It's a bit of an interesting story of an uncommon opponent for Penn State on the schedule.
Yeah, so what's cool is that over the last few years, Penn State has tried to branch out and compete against some teams that it has not seen before and or that are maybe new college wrestling teams, things like that. Wyoming is not one of those, but certainly it is one of the ones that Penn State has not seen before. You would really have to go back and dive through the archives, and I just don't have the time to do it, but I would have to think that there's very few even postseason matches between wrestlers from these two schools. So kind of a neat thing here, and the way Cody Sanderson explained it yesterday, you were there, so correct me if I'm wrong, but in listening back to it, more or less said that they were trying to find someone for this date, and that Wyoming sort of just popped up as someone that was a possibility, and here we are. And they have some talented wrestlers, successful program, and I think Penn State is working on the home and home portion of this. I would expect them to wrestle at Wyoming next year. They have yet to lock that in, but all indications are that's going to be the case. So pretty cool thing, for Penn State and for Wyoming.
Yeah, for sure. And there's some good wrestlers on the rundown as well. So let's talk about 125 because I know that's the biggest. Before we get into the full preview, I know that's the biggest matchup of the weekend. Of course, Luke Lilledahl getting a test early like this in the year is super exciting for Penn State fans. Just see just how good this freshman can be. So what is your understanding of the matchup at 125?
I will be greatly disappointed if Jor Volk is unable to wrestle for Wyoming against Penn State on Sunday at the Bryce Jordan Center. If you're not familiar with him, very accomplished guy. He's from Minnesota. He is a junior, was a 2024 All-American, 2024 Big 12 champion. He was an NCAA qualifier in 2023. Just a very good wrestler. He's number 7 in Intermat's 125-pound rankings, but he missed the Cliff Keen Las Vegas Invitational last weekend, which was a surprise. And he has not wrestled in about 2 weeks at this point. And so there is a major question about whether he is going to compete, if he's able to compete on Sunday at Rec Hall. Penn State put out its match notes not too long ago, and he was not listed on them. But I would caution not putting much stock into that, because if you looked at Penn State's match notes for Lehigh, a lot of guys who are listed didn't wrestle. So, I would wait for Wyoming to put out its notes, and that's nothing against Penn State. It's just obviously, if you're projecting a depth chart for the other side and the other side doesn't project its own depth chart, you're left guessing at some point. So
we do that a lot.
Yes.
So we understand that process.
Yeah. So we'll have all the latest information for you. Obviously, the earliest I think we get official word, unless Wyoming decides to put it out there, it would be about 2.5, 3 hours before the match at weigh-ins on Sunday. But, I will be really disappointed if that match doesn't happen. I think everyone in college wrestling would be, because it was one of the great, exciting things about this matchup. So that's number one to keep an eye on here for Penn State is will Jor Volk wrestle against Luke Lilledahl in what would be a top, let me see where they moved him to, T. Frank. That would be a top 15 matchup, because Luke Lilledahl sits at number 12 and Jor Volk still sits at number 7. So a top 15 matchup. Obviously, with a win, if it happens, Luke Lilledahl could move into the top 10 of Intermat's 125-pound rankings. Fairly irrelevant this early in the year, but worth pointing out. So that is the big thing I think Penn State fans, wrestling fans, will be watching for this weekend.
All right. So, what are the other interesting points on the rundown that you're interested in the matchups coming up this weekend?
Yeah, so if for whatever reason that match does not take place at 125 pounds, that will make the marquee duel, assuming it happens. Joey Novak, number 14 in Intermat's rankings, a sophomore for Wyoming, at 197 pounds. He just finished third at the Cliff Keen Las Vegas Invitational this past weekend. Will face Josh Barr, who we mentioned earlier, just moved into the top 10 at number 7. So Barr certainly would have expected to be favored there. Two sophomores duking it out, hopefully at the Bryce Jordan Center. But that would become the headliner duel if Luke Lilledahl does not happen. And obviously, either way, it's going to be a match to watch on Sunday if it does happen at the Bryce Jordan Center. A couple other notes. Jared Hill at 157 is number 19 in the Intermat rankings. So a good test for Tyler Kasak, assuming he is the guy and not Alex Facundo on Sunday against Wyoming. So that's a ranked matchup that's coming. Shane Van Ness will get 20, Gabe Willichel at 149. That name sounds a lot more familiar to me than it should. I'm not 100% sure why, but anyway, he is ranked by the Open Mat, so that will be a rankings to watch match with Shane Van Ness, who obviously had a closer than maybe some expected win last weekend, but certainly is off to a good start following the injury he had last year. That's why Gabe Willichel sounds familiar. He's from Greensburg, Pennsylvania. So that's why I was going to say that name sounds incredibly familiar, but why would it sound familiar? He's also a guy who was at Edinburgh previously before hitting the transfer portal to head to Wyoming. So there we go. That's called figuring things out live on the air, because I saw that in the match notes and I'm like, man, that name sounds super familiar, but I could not quite put my finger on why. Cole Brooks at 141, number 28, of course, will face Bo Bartlett in a matchup that Bartlett will be favored to win. And I think at 133, Stockton O'Brien is ranked number 32 by Flo. And will take on Braeden Davis, presumably. So another ranked matchup there. So all told, per the usual, as is the case in almost every dual meet, Penn State favored to win, but some fun matchups ahead. More importantly, a chance for more Penn State and just wrestling fans who maybe aren't Penn State fans. So I'm not sure how many of those exist within driving distance to the Bryce Jordan Center, but if there are, more seats available now at the Bryce Jordan Center for this Sunday 1 p.m. dual meet non-conference event between Penn State and Wyoming. We will have coverage at bluewhiteillustrated.com. And as Steve Frank notes, once the wrestling's done, Anti-Fragile, check it out. Big football game in the NFL this weekend, 425, Pittsburgh Steelers and Philadelphia Eagles. So
yeah,
that will be something to keep an eye on. Post-match, that is football. We are talking wrestling, but Nittany Lions looking forward to what they hope will be another successful weekend in the non-conference slate, and then they will have the trip to the collegiate wrestling duels to close out this 2024 portion of the schedule. And before we know it, we'll be on to 2025 portion, which means a Big Ten matches will be here before long.
Yeah, and we'll dive into those when they come along. But of course, during this postseason run for Penn State football, Greg is pulling double duty. He's going to be doing all of this each weekend. So please, for his sake, give a like to the video, subscribe to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, and go to bluewhiteillustrated.com to follow all his content, because he does an excellent job of splitting his time and somehow giving equal focus and equal execution to both wrestling and football, even if you just slipped in football there at the end with your Penn State playing in the NFL. I'd love to see the hot takes about that, Greg. That'd be hilarious.
Yes, me too. Yes, absolutely right, T. Frank.
Yeah. We'll be back next week with the Penn State Wrestling Show. Some programming notes to go before we get out of here. Weeks where there is not a James Franklin press conference, and I know this is going to be fluid, so just watch for the show on Wednesday or Thursday. Once football is over, this show transitions to Wednesday. So that's going to be something I just want to prep people for. I hate moving things around because I like getting in the schedule for you guys. You know when to expect these things. We've had a ton of people support this show, and I just want you to know, hopefully you're still watching here at the end, that's going to be the case. Like today, this is a bit of a surprise coming up on a Wednesday. We're going to have this be kind of a transition to Wednesdays going in the future. So thank you so much. Appreciate everyone watching the show, and we'll be back next week.